So thank you so much for having us here, and we're very excited to be here. We've got a very accomplished panel here from across Asia. And so, as mentioned, my name is Ali Madavji. I'm the managing partner of Blockchain Founders Fund. We run a venture capital firm investing in early stage companies. We also run a venture builder where we help scale early stage companies. And we also have a consulting arm focused on governments and large organizations, where we consult organizations such as the UN, where we're writing their flagship report on emerging technologies for this year. I'd like to have each of our panelists give a quick introduction about themselves, and then we'll go into the exciting topic of the rise of STOs and what that means.
Yes, so I'll begin. So hi, my name is Kyle Kim. I'm a managing director at Blockwater Management, and we're a digital asset fund based out of Korea. Over the last 1 year, we've invested over 30 projects. We invest globally, but a lot of our specialty is in the Korean projects. Prior to Blockwater, I was actually an equity analyst at a global investment bank. So my expertise has been, I've been speaking with a lot of global hedge funds, asset managers over the last 10 years.
Hello, everybody. My name is Heslin Kim. I'm the VP of Business Development at Polymath. Been with the company a year now, in the blockchain space overall, about 2.5 years. And just to give you a bit of background about what Polymath does, we're focused on creating and issuing security tokens. The platform itself leverages institutional, traditional capital markets with DLT technology in order to create new financial products that are transparent, compliant, and innovative for new issuers and investors worldwide. Thank you.
Hi, my name is David Wong. I'm the Executive Director of Gibraltar Stock Exchange. And Gibraltar Stock Exchange grew from just a single traditional securities exchange now into what we call the GSX group. It not only has the securities exchange, but we also have a licensed crypto exchange, as well as fund administration and FCA regulated broker-dealer license. So we're excited to be here to talk about the emerging STO market. And as an exchange, we are very excited to be part of this.
Hi, I'm Samson Lee, and you can call me Sam. I'm the founder and CEO of CoinStreet. I have over 20 years experience in technology financing since the dot-com days. In CoinStreet, we do 5 things. We are one-stop token financing service provider, so we provide consultancy service. So Gibraltar is actually one of our previous clients. We also provide a back-end STO platform for issuing STO tokens and OTC trading. So Polymath is actually one of our partners for token issuing. We also have an asset management company in Singapore doing crypto fund management. And we also provide the DLT technology solution more from a project management perspective. So very glad to be here today to share some views on where the industry is going. Thank you.
Absolutely. So thank you for those introductions. And some quick ground rules. Feel free to make it interesting if you disagree with any of our panelists. But Samson, let's start with you. So you're the founder and CEO of CoinStreet. You've been part of many ICO advisory boards, and now you're the co-founder of STO Global X. So is this another hype cycle with ICOs, or is this actually a real rise? What are your thoughts?
Right, okay. Well, first of all, there are many comparisons between ICO and what happened with STO now. Is actually 2 different things, right? ICO, or more, to be correct, is utility tokens, because you can do ICO for security token as well. So the utility tokens is more entitlement of future goods and services, right? So that's why it creates utilities. Where security tokens is the traditional securities, like what we're dealing with, the bonds, the stock, the debt structure. But they just both utilizing the blockchain technology, right, for the records and all that. But it's very different. Also, the targeted investor group are very different. right? If you remember the ICO days, there's still like a lot of retailers, smaller investor. We're now STO, as of today, all the regulation is strictly restricted to professional investor. And of course, there will be different definition of professional investor in different countries, but there's always still a bar up there, so very restricted.
Okay, so I mean, it sounds much more restricted. And so can you share, or someone else on our panel, maybe Heslin, can you share some insights into how that's different in terms of primary issuances and who can be involved, and maybe as well with secondary issuances or trading and how that would work?
Sure. I think an interesting point, that Samson talked about is how as the market currently stands, only accredited investors can get involved with security tokens that we see generally in the market. But with the rise of some of the new legislation in Thailand, they're actually trying to pave the way so that retail investors can get involved, from the beginning of the investment stages. So, I heard also that Taiwan might be moving into that space. I think it'll be really interesting and progressive for the entire industry as a whole. When we see the majority of issuances, they're Reg Ds and Reg S out of the US, and mainly limited to the accredited investors. And the pool is quite small, right? And liquidity is not going to pick up until we see the retail players get involved. Those markets are where the majority of the capital will lie and interact with more high frequency trading. So it's going to be really interesting to see these two markets develop in the next, I think, 6 months to a year, and have retail level exchanges for security tokens, finally go live. So yeah, very excited about that. Generally, what we see is very strict legislation, but with these two countries, it's going to be definitely a key point to watch as far as different jurisdictions are concerned.
No, absolutely. And if you're not familiar with accredited investor regulations, I guess as a high level, it depends per country, but you're looking at generally $1 million in net worth or 200 to 250K of net income per year, but of course it varies depending on the country, just to give you some insight. But I mean, Kyle, you're an investor, and you studied at the University of Pennsylvania, one of the top academic institutions in the world. You're an ex-vice president at Morgan Stanley in Korea. And so why are you excited about STOs, or are you excited about STOs, and what are some of the challenges you're seeing with STOs from an investment perspective?
Sure. So, I mean, STOs are kind of one of the reasons why I first joined this industry. I think if you look at the traditional finance sector, you start to notice a lot of the technology kind of displacing a lot of the workers. So, trading activities that used to happen by sales traders, that's been taken over by algorithmic trading. Also, a lot of the, the infrastructure is being created where the traders, the execution traders on the hedge fund side, the buy side, is no longer really interacting with the salespeople on the sell side. And I thought that security tokens, which in 2018 was a big kind of buzzword, and what interested me was that, hey, there's a technology there where I can do what I do with equity stocks. These are paper shares, but now we're digitalizing it. Valuations, which is kind of financial modeling, that's all needed for security tokens. So, one of the biggest arguments, the worries I had for ICOs was that it's very hard to value. It's hard to kind of put an intrinsic value to these utility tokens. But with security tokens, you don't really need the re-education of the institutions that everyone's wanting, the money from institutional investors coming in. You could have the existing infrastructure and existing kind of personnel from the traditional finance come into the industry without much friction, because you're going to have to speak the same language of finance. So security tokens, I really do believe that this will be kind of the way where institutional money comes in. I'm not quite sure if institutional money will come by Bitcoin, because Bitcoin has fallen 80% and it's cheap. Because how do you justify that? But when you talk about security tokens, you're talking about a real company, real revenue stream, real earnings growth, dividends, et cetera. I think that's really going to foster the transition from traditional finance over to blockchain technology.
Okay, no, very interesting. Absolutely, I know I've heard some of those things as well already from institutional investors. You may have heard this past week, Société Générale, which is one of the major French investment banks, actually did an STO, I think it was $112 million, and they actually put it on the Ethereum network for tracking. But David, you're the CEO of Stellar Partners, which is a PE and venture capital firm focused on fintech, blockchain, and IT sectors, and you're the executive director of the Gibraltar Stock Exchange. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe there's also the Gibraltar Blockchain Exchange, and there's now also a focus on STOs. So why is GBX, or the Gibraltar Stock Exchange, moving into STOs, and which part of that industry are you focused on?
Right. So I'm glad you mentioned Stellar Partners. So actually, we invested into Gibraltar Stock Exchange. It was basically a traditional EU licensed stock exchange, and we went in because we think that because we are very bullish in fintech, and we know in fintech space having a licensed entity is critical. So we went into the space in 2016. And in 2017, the ICO space took off. And again, we have the heart of, I guess, disruptor. We wanted to do something that no securities exchanges at the time were doing, which is a crypto exchange. That's why we started utility token exchange in GBX. But when the ICO boom and bust happened, and the market sort of went back to the foundation, then the emergence of security token is back into the roots of what GSX is about, which is a securities exchange. And the core business model for GSX is to create a fundraising platform for any type of companies or individual. So from ICO or IEOs to STOs and eventually into IPOs. So we want to be able to provide this pathway. And we don't necessarily make a distinction between, is it a STO or is it traditional securities? Because we think the difference is actually in the technology, because securities could be paper and pen, but now because of blockchain, it could be all digital. So we think that this industry is moving into a great direction because of the emergence of technology. So this is sort of what we bring to the table to the industry.
I mean, I think that's very important, right? And how that technology is going to emerge and change this industry. But I actually want to take the next question back to Heslin and a little bit related to that, right? So you've been involved in the blockchain and crypto space for a very long time in Korea, and now you're the vice president of business development at Polymath, and you guys have been leading the way on tokenized securities. But I always hear from people, in the audience or at these events that I go to is, well, is security tokens just a buzzword? Has anyone even issued really security tokens? I mean, what is Polymath doing around this? Have you guys been issuing anything? What's happening?
Yeah, I mean, to date, we have done 118 tokens that have been deployed with our technology solution. And I think a point that needs to be made and clear with maybe us and some of the players in the space who might be considered competitors is that at Polymath, we just focus on the technology. So if an issuer comes to us, we don't store that data for where they were from, what type of funds they're looking for, how much was completed, where they're going to be listing. We can help with those things, but it's not the core of what we do, and we don't collect that data. So we know from the platform itself that we can see these tokens that are created after the fact, 118 tokens, but the core of those tokens, we take the stance that decentralization still has some priority within the market, right? The privacy of those companies is important to us, and we do have projects that we're looking to build case studies and portfolio examples with. That we can share with the market, but it's important for us to just stay on that technology layer and not really advocate the products that come out of that. So, if Microsoft Word, they have their own technology solution. You can type documents on there, right? If someone writes the Odyssey on Microsoft Word, is it Microsoft Word's reputation that increased because of the quality of that technology? Not necessarily. How about if they just held down the 0 button, right? And you're comparing those two documents, but it's the same technology. That's really the stance that we take at Polymath, is that we are creating the smart contracts that are necessary, that are staying in line and compliant with regulation. And what happens from that, it's not the extent of what we focus on, right? We want to be the technology layer. That's our key motivating factor.
No, I think that's fantastic, and to I guess reiterate, I mean, I actually am an advisor to Polymath, but I think it's great to hear 118 security tokens issued. So then the next part, I'm going to open it up to our panel as a whole. What is right now the biggest concerns you're seeing with STOs, and what is the biggest success cases you've seen with STOs?
Well, whether STO is here today, I'd like to add a little bit. I'm based in Hong Kong, right? So it's very excited to see the regulator of Hong Kong, SFC, issue an official statement in end of March, it's not too long ago, saying STO is legal in Hong Kong. So they actually give green lights. But at the same time, in the same statement, they also mentioned the requirement for the operator to get involved to provide service. And it is the same requirement for companies issuing pirate securities, right? So from the regulator point of view, I like the point you bring out, David, is it just the difference between technology, right? In the regulator point of view, STO is just pirate placement that we have been doing for decades, right? But now in the digital format on the blockchain, so companies can issue private placement based on blockchain and call this STO now in Hong Kong in a legal way. And there are already a few in the pipeline now, and I'm sure we'll see more. And one of the bottleneck actually right now is on the investor education, right? So this will be a new asset class and targeting to the traditional investor. So we have to actually do some education in order to get people start investing and eventually hopefully build up the liquidity, right? And also that will be a two-step process. First of all, it's just like IPO, right? When you think about, there will be initial offering, right? When the stock first come to subscription, and there will be the secondary trading on the stock exchange, right? But the problem now is the license and the regulation of the STO exchange is not very mature. So there wasn't too many STO exchange exists in the world, and of course Gibraltar is one of the very progressive one. So I think this will be something that needs to be catch up.
Right. Yeah, I also agree with Sam. I think people want to take the best of what IPO and ICO could offer, and then sort of jam it into an STO. But unfortunately, at the moment, regulation, incumbent, very old regulation is preventing that from happening. I think a lot of people, because they see ICO and STO sounds very similar, they want to do the same thing in STOs. For example, they want to sell to everyone, they want to sell globally, but we have security law that prevent that. Like what Sam was saying, you need to be an accredited investor in order to invest in these very high-risk projects. And if you want to sell securities to jurisdictions, you need to follow the laws of that jurisdiction. So I think those things are still, keeping us intact because the laws are protecting the retail investors, but certain laws changes need to be made, like what Thailand and Taiwan is doing, to allow the new generation that we are in to do something more. Because these laws are written back in, for the US, 1934, 1933, so these to be updated in order to really achieve what the STO market, I think everyone is hoping to see.
So I actually agree with both David and Sam, but from an investor's point of view, we've actually seen a lot of projects that, say, their STO platform So not only do they, like Polymath, do issuance, but they say they could also start with the crowd fund, on the crowd, I guess, the community management, all the way to fundraising, and then the exchange and the custodian. And from an investor point of view, we see issues along the way for each layer. So when you start talking about protocols, right now, I believe a lot of the STO protocols companies are kind of based on ERC. But that's because that's the most widely used platform for ICOs. But then, so we still don't, there's a lot of upgrades being made to that system, a lot of standards that are being included, like the 1400 that Polymath is kind of working on, which is a suite of all these upgrades, not only KYC AML, but enforcing off-chain data to on-chain. But is there something more we could do? So instead of using Ethereum, could there be a new kind of protocol that's specifically meant for security tokens? I think that could be one way. Another issue on the smart contracts is this legally enforceable? Yeah, you could code legal documents or legal kind of, you could code the legal kind of authorizations into the token, but then does that apply in the real world? I think that's a major issue, and a lot of the legal engineering needs to be done. And then thirdly is the really issuance. I think Polymath has done a great job on kind of creating that template on the technology side, but I think more and more as these technology grows, I think there could be more that can be done. And then the fourth last stage is the exchange and the custodianship, which a lot of the institutional investors have always been saying is the biggest barrier for adoption. Exchanges right now, we don't know what kind of liquidity to expect. We earlier talked about how retail investors can get in. Maybe that could change, but then when you talk about developed markets like the US, Japan, et cetera, they want to protect the retail investors. And these are very risky investments. Security tokens, maybe not as much, because now you could actually do traditional kind of finance and valuation models. But liquidity and custodianship is going to remain these obstacles until these things are resolved. We're not so sure how fast there's going to be adoption. At least that's from my point of view.
No, for sure. And I think there's a lot of different challenges that were mentioned here. And to touch on a couple, I know education was mentioned and educating investors about STOs and what that means. But I'm going to press a little harder here. So, investors, of course, understand traditional investments. And is one of the problems that you're seeing the types of companies maybe that are doing STOs? And so what are your thoughts on the types of companies that should be doing STOs, keeping in mind that when I actually arrived here, I was chatting with several people in the audience, and different people were thinking about doing STOs. And so what are your thoughts on the types of companies that should be doing STOs? Is there a difference? Can anyone do an STO? I'll leave it open.
That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. Right? The way we see all this ICO, STO, even IPO is one thing. If you think about from an entrepreneurial point of view on the financial cycle, right? A company start up with a seed capital, angel rounds, and maybe go to VC for A round, B round, and later on some debt, and then IPO eventually, right? But IPO requirements so high, not everybody get there, right? So when you think about it, ICO is sort of like in the beginning when people crowdfunding about an idea, nothing exists, right? It's like an angel round, right? So of course the failure rate is much higher, right? So that's how we see ICO. And then people go for the VC, the traditional A and B. The way we position STO is actually on the P-IPO round, right? Because you think about STO is about securities. You need to build in some value to the security behind, right? A startup company doing STO is not much meaning, right? But you think about it for P-IPO companies, right? There's a lot of companies today not able to meet the IPO requirement, right? But after they got the VC money from A and B, they're on their own. It's very difficult to reach the final goal of IPO. If STO can provide alternative path into providing the growth funding for the growth run of the business, right? Where an entrepreneur can have an alternative to get some funding to grow the business without diluting too much of the shares, right? Because when they go IPO, it's very valuable. I think this could be a very good way to use STO as a tool.
I think, for example, one of the reasons why a lot of people talk to us in the beginning when during ICO is that they are SMEs. They feel like I am a traditional business, I'm profitable, how can I join the ICO craze? Because I am not a blockchain company, I'm not creating a protocol, but I have cash flow. So I think with the advance of STO, these SMEs with cash flow would be ideal candidate because a security is essentially an investment contract. You buy the token with an expectation of profit, and these are the companies that can provide some sense of security that, oh, I may be able to buy this, invest in this, and make a profit in dividend. And I think these are cash flow positive would be one. Similar to what Sam was saying, these are pre-IPO companies, but perhaps even earlier, I think can also be good. And another class would be asset-backed companies or projects. For example, real estate, paintings, these are some of the things that you have tangible assets, unlike an ICO, which is perhaps just an idea. I think these are safer for the industry to absorb in the beginning, instead of, we go too quickly into very risky space.
I think another interesting thing is doing an STO for something that's non-tangible. So intellectual property rights and distributing breaking up that into a certain amount of shares and being able to sell that out. I think the application for what we see with STOs right now, it's generally stuck in a small niche group, right? We're seeing a lot of equity, we're seeing funds, we're seeing real estate tokenized, asset-backed, a little bit of non-tangible, financial products. But I think the scope of what we're going to see in the future and the way that STOs are going to be applied, it's far greater than I think what we can imagine right now. The technology itself, is escalating. Kyle mentioned that, as things are currently built on Ethereum, it's a great test bed, it's a great test network. That's why we saw the 2017 boom with all the dApps that exploded. But having something a bit more specialized, and maybe even certain DLT networks that are specific to different industries of securities. I think an interesting thing as well are central bank digital currencies, which can be applied. We can launch asset-backed tokens that could potentially be used as currencies. There's a whole realm of ideas that I think once this industry solidifies the regulation, solidifies the secondary markets, we see stronger use cases as a whole, at the entirety of this ecosystem, then we're going to start getting into some extremely innovative spaces with what the potential of this technology as a whole is. Aside from fundraising and aside from moving to a stock exchange as the end goal, the use cases for some of these STOs is quite extraordinary, and we've seen we get a lot of inbound requests for companies that are looking to do some very interesting things, but it just might not be the right time yet. We don't have the infrastructure ready. But I think that is something to anticipate and be ready for. It's definitely going to be an exciting space within the next year when we see regulatory issues and frameworks, solidified. When we see some of the larger stock exchanges starting to get involved, and when we see just a standardization across the entire industry. So, very much looking forward to the landscape that we're going to see ahead of us.
Absolutely. I think we're actually going to open it up to questions shortly. So if you do have a question, please put up your hand. But I think in the meantime, does anyone have a question? Any questions? You've got a great panel here. Don't be shy. Nope. Okay. So, I think on the point that you had around the immaturity, I think that this is something that is evolving, and I think there's a lot to still see in the future. I know from our side, on the venture capital side, to speak of the immaturity, we actually had a company, as a funny story, we had a company come to us. It was kind of like a green-based company, 200,000 in revenue, a couple of thousand in net income, and they were doing a net income-based security token. And our valuation model that our analyst did came out that they were looking for a 12+ billion valuation. But now we've started to see, and that was a little while ago, and now we've started to see more proper STOs being issued. We're seeing very interesting things. I mean, Bitbon just had their security token issued, which was by the German, on the German market. So pretty exciting things happening. So I don't think we have any questions. So we're going to actually wrap up with a final exercise. And so I want you guys to finish this sentence. So tokenized securities will, ... And so tokenized securities will. And we'll start from that side. So Samson.
Okay, well, I use a more controversial perspective, right? I would say tokenized securities is going to change the financial and investment industry like YouTube is changing the media industry. You think about it, the globalization of global investor able to invest in all the individual unique business in every corner of the world. That globalization is the power.
Hey, very powerful. For me, I guess I would say tokenizing securities will allow more choices and flexibility to the issuer and to the investor, because we were exploring all these different what you can tokenize, and I think this opens up a lot of great things. And I want to see a hybrid. I want to see a security token that has a utility function to it. I think that would be something very interesting.
I think tokenized securities, what we call security tokens, security tokens will surprise you. Just what we're seeing from Polymath's side and the technology and the inbound and everything that we see ahead of us. I think behind the curtains, we get to see a lot more about the industry that's not public yet. And really what's ahead of us is a very, very interesting next 10 years for the revolution of financial products.
Securitized tokens will tokenize securities. But more jokes aside, I think securitized tokens will bring in institutional money. Going back to my earlier point, institutional money, I think the education gap that everyone's kind of worried about for bringing institutional, traditional finance personnel into the space, knowing how to, really invest rather than, speculate at this moment for a lot of these utility tokens. I think that's really going to change the game, and I think STOs will really be in the front, kind of driving that change.
So I'm going to go on a little bit of a different path, I think. So tokenized securities will give regulators the tools that they need to combat things like insider trading and break through some of these kind of corporation veils that prevent really cracking down on some of the problems in our financial industry. So thank you so much. You guys have been a great audience. Thank you so much for our panel who've come a long way to be here. And so please give our panel a round of applause.
Do we have any questions from the audience for the panelists?
Oh, we do. Do we have one or no? Oh, yes.
As we saw with the ICO boom being an attractive vessel for alternative fundraising for businesses and startups alike, the pitfall that many of them fell into that attracted the eyes of regulators was that there was no actual utility to the token they were offering, so they ended up classified as securities. If a company wants to do an STO, are there any potential pitfalls we may not see right now that we can avoid by taking any steps?
I guess I'll start. I think one of the first things, if you are thinking about doing an STO, you really need to know where is the company going to be domiciled in, and you need to know in which jurisdiction you're going to sell to. For example, if I want to sell to the US citizens, you gotta comply with all the SEC rules, right? If you want to sell to Europe, you have to comply with all these rules. So, but the good thing and the bad thing is security laws are pretty clear and strict. So there is a thing you can follow. The most important thing is you don't want to sell to the people that you shouldn't sell to. For example, you need to make sure that they are really accredited investors and not, you have to verify them. You cannot just take their words for it. And if that were the case, then you get all kinds of trouble. So that's one of the things that I wanted to add. Yeah.
And I'd like to add to that as well. In terms of the ICO space, we saw a lot of companies that would just go out. They had any idea, they'd immediately go out, start doing marketing. They'd hit road shows and start doing the fundraising there. And we started to see that kind of happen in the STO space, but we saw a firm hammer come down with that pretty quickly. Even the HKMA made their statement just recently that you must be licensed and approved to solicit securities in Hong Kong, because we did see several different conferences and events and STOs. It is somewhat of a buzzword now, right? So having products to come on stage and market, you need to be very careful with the types of things that you're saying about your product when you're doing fundraising, and making sure that at all times you're staying legal and compliant with multiple jurisdictions. So you definitely need to have legal advisory in the countries that it's domiciled in, where you're going to be raising from, and then have the legal advice for both of them at all times, plus the marketing teams who are aware of that. So it's really a large package that needs to be very thoroughly thought out before executing.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. If you do have any other questions, please come to us afterwards. Feel free to approach any of our panel members. And thank you so much again.
Thank you very much, panelists.